2 years since we got our first brief teaser of the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Nintendo finally gave us a better look at what to expect at E3 2021. The new footage hints at new areas, gear, enemies, and more that go well beyond the scope of the initial trailer. So with that in mind, here are 8 new things we learned about Breath of the Wild sequel. In the first trailer, we saw a spooky, glowing green arm holding what we assume is a mummified Ganondorf in place. In this new trailer, we got a brief flash of the red blight threatening to consume Link's arm, but it looks like that green arm is now integrated with Link's in some fashion, possibly saving him from the blight. We get a better look at Link's right arm later in the trailer, which now seems to be discolored and covered in some strange Sheikah tech. This could be bad or good, but either way, it very well could be the key to resealing Mummy Ganondorf once again. The 2019 trailer may have given the impression that the sequel would be taking place entirely, or mostly, underground, but it seems like the sequel will introduce players to a chain of large floating islands spanning the skies above Hyrule, including a similarly floating Hyrule castle, which may make running straight to the final boss at the start harder than it was in Breath of the Wild. So far, these floating isles have a visually striking theme of stone ruins and vibrant yellow ginkgo trees. It looks like they vary in size and height, and one island in particular has a giant structure on it, perhaps home to an honest-to-goodness dungeon, which was notably absent in the original Breath of the Wild. The Divine Beasts just don't quite compare. We briefly saw Link sporting some of his more familiar champion's tunic with some slight tweaks, like new leather armor over a black undergarment and chainmail. It looks like there's also some new outfits to find in the sequel, like a toga and sandals combo. Also, has Link's hair gotten a bit longer? Some people have speculated that this version of Link might be on a different timeline, but it's also likely we're just seeing another hairstyle, similar to how certain armor sets in Breath of the Wild changed his look. There's more than just new outfits to wear. Link's also sporting some brand new gear. His trusty paraglider now has a new look, complete with tassels and streamers, but we don't know if the changes will help him traverse the floating islands better, or if it's just cosmetic. And while Link doesn't swing any swords in this teaser, he is sporting 2 new shields, a stony one with a Sheikah emblem, and one with a big dragon head that acts like a defensive flamethrower. Speaking of new gear, Link's new arm appears to be full of surprises. At one point, he freezes a spiked metal ball in place, a power similar to those he unlocked in Breath of the Wild, but done so by his hand and not with a Sheikah slate. Unlike the individual effects of magnesis or stasis, Link is able to freeze time and the object, see the predicted path the spiked ball took, and instantly shoot it back up the hill. So what happened to the Sheikah slate? Odds are it probably fell into the pit along with Zelda, but having those Sheikah powers embedded in Link's arm will more than make up for it. In Breath of the Wild, Link could only get an aerial boost by using updrafts or invoking Revali's Gale, but now it seems you'll be able to quickly fly up to the mini floating islands using strange puddles on the ground and swim through the top of the island. The accompanying green glow might mean that this is also the work of his new arm and whatever power Link is imbued with. The sequel to Breath of the Wild may be set in the same familiar area of Hyrule, but it looks like there will be at least a few changes across the land, namely in some enemy encounters. Enemies like bokoblins and moblins are sporting a few differences like bigger horns and have even built small wooden platforms on tops of stone talus mini-bosses. Up in the skies are some brand new enemies, like a large foe that gives off some Guardian vibes, but appears to be made of stone that matches the ruins you'll find on the floating island. The unnerving distorted voice and music we heard in the 2019 trailer returns briefly in the footage, and it seems to be linked to whatever is behind those floating islands and the arm that was keeping Mummy Ganondorf at bay. These elements might relate to why Nintendo hasn't given the sequel a name, as it's only been officially referred to as the sequel to Breath of the Wild. IGN actually spoke with Nintendo of America's Bill Trinan about the secrecy, and he said there's a good reason for it. Quote, "As for why we're holding back on the name, you'll have to just stay tuned because, obviously, Zelda names are kind of important," Trinan told IGN. "Those subtitles, they start to give little bits of hints about maybe what's going to happen. Given that the developers themselves said the first game's title referred to the expansive wilds of Hyrule being the star of the show, the sequel's name will clearly help us unlock some of the mystery that remains." Nintendo is aiming to release it sometime in 2022, so stay tuned for more as Nintendo clues us in on this mysterious sequel. And until then, stick with IGN for all the latest news on The Legend of Zelda.